Hey, what's up guys? Hardleg Joe here with the deck profile for the Cyber Dragon OTK deck. I'm just going to go through everything in here, and then I'll explain how it works. So for monsters, we've got 3 of the Star-Destroying Kaiju, 3 Cyber Eltanin, 3 Cyber Dragon, 2 Toon Cyber Dragon, 3 Galaxy Soldier, 3 Cyber Dragon Dry, 2 Cyber Dragon Zwei, and 3 Cyber Dragon Core. For spells, we're playing 3 Instant Fusion, 3 Overload Fusion, the Triumvirate of Destruction, which is 1 Raigeki, 2 Dark Hole, 3 Power Bond, 2 Cyber Repair Plant, 3 Twin Twisters, and our Soul Trap is 1 Cyber Network. For the extra deck, we're playing Cyber End Dragon, Chimeratech Over Dragon, Cyber Twin Dragon, 2 Chimeratech Fortress Dragon, 2 Chimeratech Rampage Dragon, 1 Pair Psychroid, 2 Panzer Dragon, 2 Cyber Dragon Infinity, 1 Wind-Up Arsenal Zenmayo, and 2 Cyber Dragon Nova. The side deck, I'll go over in a moment. So this is an OTK deck, which if you're unfamiliar with that term, stands for 1 turn kill. We're trying to do 8,000 or more damage to our opponent in 1 turn. That usually involves going second, so that we can attack with big, powerful fusion monsters. We've actually got a couple different ways we can OTK, depending on what your starting hand is and depending on what your opponent has. Before I go into the monsters themselves, though, we're talking about the ways we can fusion. We have 2 cards that can fusion. Power Bond is probably the stronger of the 2 fusion cards, but it's also the most situational, and it has kind of a negative side effect if you don't OTK. This is Fusion Summon a Machine-type monster using monsters from your hand or your side of the field as materials, and it gains attack equal to its original attack, so it's essentially doubled. During the end phase of the turn the card was activated, though, you take damage equal to the amount of attack you gained from this. So we don't have a whole lot of searching and draw power, so that's why this is kind of situational. Since it's only from your hand or your side of the field, you have to have the right mixture of cards to open up with in order for this to be live. But if it is live, you can often OTK with just this on its own. In particular with Cyber Twin Dragon. This is a fusion of any 2 Cyber Dragons, which we're of course playing 3 of, but then we've also got a lot of cards that can make their name become Cyber Dragon when they're on the field. And it can attack twice during each battle phase. With Power Bond, it'll be up to 5,600 attack. So if your opponent has something on the field with like less than 2,000 attack, or if you can get a direct attack in by using one of your field wiping cards, you're going to be able to OTK just with that. The next most likely is Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. This is 2 or more Cyber Dragon monsters, which means it doesn't have to be the original Cyber Dragon. It can be any of these cards that have Cyber Dragon in their name, including Toon Cyber Dragon. This is a fusion summon of this card, can only be done with the above materials. When it's fusion summoned, you can target spell traps up on the field up to the number of fusion materials used and destroy them. And you can use 2 or more Cyber Dragons, so if your opponent has a bunch of back row and you have a bunch of Cyber Dragons in your hand, you can actually get rid of just about everything. And then most importantly, during your turn, you can send 2 light machine monsters from your deck to the graveyard, and this gains an additional attack for each one during this battle phase. So normally it only has 2,100 attack, but of course if you use Power Bond with it, it'll have 42. It comes out, it destroys spell traps on the field. If you can get rid of everything they have, then you're attacking directly 3 times with 4,200. You're pretty much guaranteed game. This and Cyber Twin are probably going to be your most likely, but the other ones can be just as useful. We got Cyber End Dragon. This is 3 Cyber Dragons, 4,000 attack, and it does piercing. So of course with Power Bond it'll be 8,000 and do piercing. Unlikely that you'll get the OTK, but if your opponent has a clear field or a 0 defense point monster, then you can OTK with that. We also got Chimeratech Over Dragon. This is Cyber Dragon plus 1 or more machine-type monsters. So you can use anything in the deck because we're playing all light machines. When this is fusion summoned, you send all of the cards you control to the graveyard. Its attack and defense become equal to the number of materials you use for the fusion summon times 800, and each turn this card can attack your opponent's monsters a number of times equal to how many materials you used. So this one's particularly difficult to get with Power Bond, just because you need a whole lot of monsters in your hand to really make it worthwhile. If you can get 3 or 4 monsters, then you're getting a crap ton of attack, and of course you can attack 3 or 4 times. So if they got a whole bunch of face-up monsters, you could do a lot of damage. Of course, it sends all other cards you control to the graveyard, so you always want to make sure if you're doing this and something else, that you summon this one first. Finally on here, we just got Pair Psychroid. This is any 2 machine-type monsters with the same name, which of course we got a lot of cards that their name becomes Cyber Dragon, so you can get this pretty decently. Can attack your opponent directly. So with Power Bond, it'll be 3,200 direct attack. Not an OTK, but in combination with some other things, this can actually be pretty effective, at least for enough for a 1-of. Now your other fusion starter in here is Overload Fusion. This is banish from your side of the field or your graveyard materials for a dark machine type fusion monster, and then special summon it from the extra deck. So this is a little bit more useful because we got a lot of cards that dump into the graveyard. It doesn't boost their attack, and you can only use it to make the dark, which means pretty much Chimeratech or Over Dragon. But Over Dragon, because you can use as many materials as you want, this can actually be really good with Overload Fusion, especially mid to late game. If you've got like 6 or 7 cards in your graveyard, you could just banish everything and bring this out with a crap ton of attack and have 7 or 8 attacks, at least on monsters. Probably most importantly, because Power Bond sends to the graveyard and Overload banishes from the graveyard, if you happen to start out with both of these and 2 Cyber Dragons, then you can make 2 of these, one of which will have double attack. Now we do have 2 other fusion monsters in here. They're not quite OTK enablers, but they're pretty useful in general. First is Chimeratech Fortress Dragon. You summon this without using fusion, and it's Cyber Dragon plus 1 or more machine-type monsters, and you can use cards from either side of the field. And the original attack of this card becomes the number of materials times 1,000. So the most important part of this is just the fact that you can use materials from either side of the field. That's why we're playing the Star-Destroying Kaiju. This is a light machine-type monster. So what you can actually do is special summon this to your opponent's side of the field, tribute over one of their monsters, and then special summon your Cyber Dragon, which, if you're unfamiliar with this somehow, it's a simple effect. If your opponent controls a monster and you control none, you can just special summon this from your hand. So then you've got a Cyber Dragon on your side of the field, a machine on their side of the field, and you can send those both to the graveyard to get a 2,000 attack Chimeratech Fortress Dragon. And of course, if they're playing a machine deck themselves, something like Super Heavy Samurai, or even there's an invoked machine, the light one, this can work pretty good as well. Just because sending the materials to the graveyard for a fusion summon isn't something that can be negated. Even if they Solemn Strike the summon of the Chimeratech Fortress Dragon, they still lose their monsters, so it's actually pretty brutally effective. The other fusion monster in here is just Panzer Dragon. It's a level 5 light machine type monster. If it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. This is normally summoned with a machine type monster and a dragon monster, but we don't have any dragons, so we just summon it with instant fusion, pay 1,000 life points, summon a level 5 or lower. It has quite a couple different utilities. Obviously, it's a light machine, so if it gets on the field or in the graveyard, you can use it as fusion material for starting the audio. Because instant fusion will destroy it at the end of the turn, you can use it just as spot removal to destroy a card if you're worried about something. Most notably, this is important for your Ixie engine. Our main one is Cyber Dragon Nova, which requires 2 level 5 machine-type monsters, and this is one of those. So you've got one of your materials if you've got an instant fusion just right there. And I'll go over how the rest of these use the Ixie engine, but while I'm down here, I might as well just go over Cyber Nova Dragon, because it can actually OTK in this deck as well. This is once per turn. You can detach a material from this to target a Cyber Dragon in your graveyard, special summon this target. Also, once per turn, during either player's turn, you can banish one Cyber Dragon from your hand or face up in your monster zone, and this card gains 2,100 attack until the end of this turn. So what you can do with this is actually summon a Cyber Dragon out of your graveyard, and then first attack with the Cyber Dragon, then banish it to make this go up to 4,200 attack. So already you're going to like more than 6,000 attack, and if you have anything else on the field, you can OTK with that. In addition, it has this effect that if it's sent to the graveyard by an effect your opponent controls, you can special summon a machine-type fusion monster from your extra deck. So you can use that to get something like Cyber Twin, or I think even Cyber End, I'm not sure. Probably most importantly, though, you can use this as material for Cyber Dragon Infinity. You can Ixie summon this by using a Cyber Dragon Nova that you control as material. This card gains 200 attack for every material attached to it. Once per turn, you can target a face-up attack position monster and attach it as material, and during either player's turn, you can detach to negate and destroy an effect. This is really good, especially if you don't get your OTK, because it's a great stall card. A lot of people have difficulty getting over it. In addition, it's also not too difficult to summon this and then also fusion summon after you get a material or 2 into the graveyard, or maybe summon something out with Nova, and then use it with Power Bond, and then make a Cyber Dragon Infinity for higher attack. So there's a lot of different combos you can do with that. Really strong card in general. The only other card in here is Wind Up Arsenal Zenmayo. This is just, you could detach to target 2 set cards on the field and destroy it. It's only really here because it's a level 5 machine. Some of your cards lock you to just summoning machine-type monsters, and there's a couple decent level 5 machines. Magna Liger, Machu Mech, Dvorak's King of Heavy Industry. These are all good options. I just went for this because I didn't have as much spell trap removal. The one thing you really have to worry about in this deck is Solemn Strike, because that'll negate the summon of your monsters and stop you from OTKing. That's also why we play Twin Twisters, destroy as many back row as possible, and it gets Cyber Dragons into the graveyard so you can use them for Overload Fusion, or with your Cyber Repair Plant. This is a search card. If Cyber Dragon's in your graveyard, you can activate one of these effects. If 3 Cyber Dragons are in your graveyard, you can activate both the effects. Either add 1 light machine monster from your deck to your hand, or target 1 light machine in your graveyard and shuffle it into the deck. We're almost exclusively using that first effect just because it searches everything in the deck. You can get materials for your fusion. You can even search your Star Destroying Kaiju if you need to use that. And it's searchable by Cyber Dragon Core. I guess I'll go ahead and go over the main deck monsters right now. This is when it's normal summon, you can add one Cyber Spell Trap from your deck to your hand, which includes Repair Plant and our one Cyber Network I'll get to in a moment. If your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can banish this from your graveyard to summon a Cyber Dragon monster from your deck. You can only use one of these effects per turn. And probably most importantly, this card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while it is on the field or in the graveyard. So if you normal summon this and then have a Cyber Dragon in your hand, you can use Power Bond to get your Cyber Twin or your Rampage Dragon. Probably more importantly, because its name is Cyber Dragon, you can use it for Fortress Dragon, and it's better to get a 400 off the field. Put this on their side of the field, normal summon this, and then you're trading it out for a 2,000 attack point monster. Next up is Cyber Dragon Y, probably the least useful. It's level 4, so you can't really use it for Ixie. It gains 300 attack when it attacks the opponent's monster, which puts it to 18, meh. And once per turn, you can reveal one spell card in your hand. This card's name becomes Cyber Dragon until the end phase. Its name also becomes Cyber Dragon when it's in the graveyard, just automatically. So it's best when in the graveyard. If you have to discard something, discard this if you can. Send it to the graveyard with your Rampage Dragon so you don't have to draw it. But in a pinch, you can use it just like your Dragon Core. Normal summon it, reveal your Power Bond, it becomes Cyber Dragon, and then you can Power Bond into one of your bigger, more powerful monsters. Cyber Dragon Dry is a little more useful. When it's normal summoned, you can make all Cyber Dragons you currently control level 5, but you can't special summon monsters for this turn except for machine-type monsters. Also, if this is banished, you could target a Cyber Dragon you control. It cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects this turn. This card's name is Cyber Dragon while it's on the field or in the graveyard, just automatically. So again, normal summon it, then you can make it Power Bond. Probably more importantly, if you special summon a Cyber Dragon, you can then normal summon this, it becomes level 5, and you can go into your Ixie plays. Likewise, if you have it in Instant Fusion, you've got your Cyber Dragon Nova. If you've got it in Galaxy Soldier, there's another just level 5 light machine. You could special summon it by sending another light monster from your hand to the graveyard. And when you do, you can add another copy of itself from your deck to your hand. It's actually any Galaxy monster, but this is the only one we play. This is, again, just useful for making the Ixies almost exclusively. You can use it once it gets in the graveyard for Over Dragon, but mostly we're just using it as Ixie material. Same thing with Cyber Toon Dragon. It's just another level 5 Ixie. It's another light monster you can discard for things. You can send it to the graveyard. And because it's a Cyber Dragon monster, you can use it for Rampage Dragon. The only other really interesting here is Cyber Eltanen. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by banishing all light machine type monsters from your side of the field and in your graveyard. Its attack and defense become the number of banished monsters times 500, and when it's special summoned, send all other face-up monsters on the field to the graveyard. This is a great tech card. If you get it early in the game, it's not too difficult to just like normal summon a core, search whatever you need, and then banish the core for Cyber Eltanen. It'll only have 500 attack, but it'll wipe your opponent's field. So if you have the ability to fuse, you can clear the field with this and then attack for a whole bunch. If you get it late game and you have a whole bunch of cards in your graveyard, this thing can actually get up to 6,000, 7,000 attack, and it clears the field beforehand, so then you can attack for that 7,000 and do massive amounts of damage. The only important thing to keep in mind is like your Over Dragon, when it's summoned, it sends all face-up monsters to the graveyard. So you want to always summon it first and then go into your plays. If you try to summon it after the fact, you'll send your own monsters to the graveyard. And that brings us to the only other thing I didn't really explain, and that's the Cyber Network. This is destroy this card after the third end phase after it was activated once per turn. If Cyber Dragon is on the field, you can banish a light-type machine monster from the deck. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, special summon as many of your banished light machine monsters as possible. Destroy all spell trap cards you control. Monsters with special summon cannot activate their effects, and you can't conduct your battle phase this turn. So a lot of text there, kind of tricky, kind of slow. That's why we only played it one. But in clutch situations, especially in longer games, this can actually be really, really good. You can use Cyber Eltanen or your Overload Fusion to banish a bunch of monsters, and then when this is destroyed, you can get things back out. If you just have this in a Cyber Dragon core, you can immediately banish a Star Destroying Kaiju, and then when this is destroyed, either 3 turns later or when your opponent destroys it, then you'll summon this banished card and be able to have just a 3,300 attacker on your side of the field. There's a lot of things you can do with it. It can be really bricky if you get more than one, and it takes a lot of turns. Oftentimes your opponent won't destroy it, or they'll use like Castell to send it back or something like that. That just brings us to our side deck. Limiter removal, you'll probably want to play this. This is double the attack of all machine-type monsters, but destroy them during the end phase. This just makes your OTKs even stronger, helps you OTK even if you don't have Power Bond. The only reason I don't play it, I don't really like one-ofs, especially sacky ones, where it's like, if you get this, you pretty much just win. It's not really interesting to watch for the episodes, but if you're playing it and trying to do competitive, definitely put this in. The rest of these are actually decent side deck cards. The 2 more Cyber Networks, these could be useful in more grindier games if you're going against someone who plays a slower paced deck. Another Cyber Repair Plant if you need to search more or recycle things. We've got more level 5 machine type Ixies. Sea Monster of Theseus is actually pretty good. You could summon it with Instant Fusion. It's a level 5 tuner, which means you can Cyber Dragon, make this, and then go into Ultimaya Tzolk'in. And then you set any of your spell cards, and then you can special summon Synchro Dragons out of your extra deck. I had this in here originally, but it was a little crowded. I'd prefer to have the more fusion targets for the OTKs. These don't really help you OTK, it's just a cool thing you can do. But if you wanted to make this more of a Cyber Dragon toolbox, you could definitely add those in. That just leaves us Electromagnetic Turtle. Drew Manian actually suggested this quite a lot, but it doesn't really help you OTK, so I didn't put it in here. But it's another light machine type monster. You can banish it from your graveyard to end the battle phase, so it helps you stall for another turn. And of course, it's good to put in the graveyard for any of your things. It's another light machine. And you can send it to the graveyard directly with Cyber Rampage Dragon. So it can be pretty good, especially if you get into a stallier game. And put in this, put in the Electromagnetic Turtles. And finally, just Summoner Monk, because we have a whole lot of spells, and sometimes your power bonds can be dead in your hand. This can be a pretty good way of getting out like your Dries or your Zwais if you need. Just your level 4 monsters. Of course, we're not playing any rank 4 Ixies. If you wanted to play this, you'd probably want to put those in there. It's not a light machine type monster, so it doesn't really fit with everything. But in certain versions of the deck, it could work pretty well. So there's your deck for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. I did my best with Cyber Dragon OTK. I'm in kind of a time crunch. Hopefully, I know this is a fan favorite deck. Hopefully I did well enough that you guys will enjoy it. Next week, I have no idea what I'm doing. So until then, good luck and have fun.